with nothing else to do. A lovely view of heaven.
Hey everybody, day 21, Quarantine History. This is going to be the last day of the division stuff in the unit. Tomorrow, you will, I'll open the test for you. I'll give you Thursday and Friday to work on it. I'll put a deadline at Sunday night on there for you to turn it in. I like this unit. The Missouri Compromise thing is pretty neat. Slavery is going to start to really rear its ugly head and really divide the country. The whole Andrew Jackson and the Democrats and this Jacksonian democracy, this idea that more people are going to be involved in the political process because you're getting rid of the requirements for land ownership to vote, and you're headed back to a two-party system. The era of good feelings thing is over. You have the whole corrupt bargain with John Adams and the reason that Andrew Jackson on his deathbed wanted to shoot him, and then you have the Jackson's victory as president and John C. Calhoun, the vice president, standing with South Carolina when it comes to the nullification thing, which is, by the way, the reason he should have hung him on his deathbed for treason. And so then, from there we started talking about the abolitionist movement, which I'll remind you, the stumbling block is that they don't like slavery, but they're not exactly sure, and they can't come to an agreement on how it should end and what should happen to the slaves when it's all over. We did William Lloyd Garrison's response to David Walker that it's not abolitionist to encourage the slaves to rebel, it's white people, and they do that every 4th of July by celebrating their freedom from British slavery through violence, which I thought was really, really good. Monday, the video was Frederick Douglass and his speech on the 4th of July, which also I find very, very interesting. I can't imagine being there, inviting this guy, being excited to hear him, and for white people it's a day of celebration, and he just blasts the whole thing. Good for him, to take that risk and put it out there. But it's awful famous. Probably one of the more famous things that Frederick Douglass does, and Frederick Douglass is going to stick around. He's not going anywhere. He'll eventually advise President Lincoln. It's funny, I don't think we'll get there, but Lincoln, Douglass doesn't think a whole lot of Lincoln. And because Lincoln's not initially going to talk about ending slavery, Lincoln's going to run on a campaign about not letting slavery spread any further. I'll be back. Sorry. His campaign's gonna be about not allowing slavery to extend any further than where it already is. Ultimately, his feelings about slavery will change, and once the Civil War started, the end goal for the Union and for Lincoln will be to abolish slavery completely. And Frederick Douglass will eventually will change his opinion of Lincoln. And so we're almost done. Like I said, this will be the last day of notes. William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass. The most effective abolitionists are going to be former slaves themselves, people who have lived through experience. There's a lot of them. Charles Raymond, Sojourner Truth. You get 1861, Harriet Jacobs is going to write, and an abolitionist is going to help her publish Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. I've attempted to read it. There's a lot of things that go into it that make it pretty rough. But Um, these things are going to come out. The other thing that's going to start with the abolitionist movement and gain momentum once it starts to gain a little traction is the Underground Railroad. And the Underground Railroad, there were no trains, there were no tracks. Some people think that they all hopped on a train that went underneath the ground. And it's not really how it worked. Free Africans, former slaves, abolitionists are going to create a network of safe houses and routes for slaves to escape, and they're going to help them do that. It's called the Underground Railroad because, similar to a train, there is a network, there is a path that is followed, it stops, it has a schedule, and they're going to use that verbiage that's used with trains to try to keep what they're doing secret. Obviously, and you wouldn't know this, I don't know how far we'll get in the year, but 1850, it becomes a federal crime to help slaves escape, and the punishment is 6 months in prison and $1,000 fine, which back then was a lot of money. And so these people are going to do this as secretly as possible and try to get away with it. In most instances, it was the slave's responsibility to get into the free states. You had to get there, and once you got there, you would be helped. Very rarely, and we'll talk about one exception, very rarely were white abolitionists going back into the South, gathering people up and then leading them out. I mean, you're asking to be hung at that point. There are exceptions, and we'll get to one here in a minute. But the Underground Railroad is going to help slaves escape. Slaves were going to leave the southern states. They were going to follow the North Star. It's the only stationary point in the sky. And then they were going to cross into free states if they could make it that far, and then they would be helped. During the day, they would hide in what were called stations, safe houses, usually owned by abolitionists or Quakers. And these houses would have a lot of them hiding places. I don't know how well you can see the picture, but tunnels underneath the building. There's false floors, there's false bottoms in wagons, holes in cubbies in the wall where you would hide people. They would stay there. The conductor who was running that station would send word to the next place that the train would be leaving later on tonight. It had so many 3, 2, 4, 6 passengers. You could expect the train to arrive at a so-and-so time, and then that person would be passed on and moved to the next spot. I'll try to put this on the screen. I can find the same picture. This is a map of the primary routes of escape for slaves from the southern states north. If I can put it up there for you, there's a ton of them that run through the free state of Ohio. Most slaves escaped through there. The Appalachian Mountains are really in the way. Pennsylvania is not going to be a whole lot involved. What was now today West Virginia was Virginia back then. It was a slave state. But the people in northwestern Virginia, today's what's West Virginia and Wheeling and Weird and those places, there wouldn't have been much slavery there. You can't grow cotton. You can't do any of that stuff. And so there's not a whole lot of slaves who are going to escape and come this way. Most of them escape through Ohio or through Baltimore, Philadelphia, and then to New York City. One of the only places I found involved in the Underground Railroad here in western Pennsylvania was the Lemoyne House, which is in Washington, PA, and it still exists. I already told you conductors would send word to the next station and slaves were on their way. The most famous of all the conductors on the Underground Railroad was a lady by the name of Harriet Tubman. She is soon to, at least I think she's soon to, I thought it was supposed to happen already, she's soon to replace Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill. She escapes in 1849 from a plantation in Maryland. She left behind her husband, parents, sisters, everybody. She left them all. She initially had tried to escape with both of her brothers. They got pretty far and got scared and all turned around and went back. And then she'll escape a second time on her own and head to New York. She's going to return to the South 19 times. All the pictures of Harriet Tubman are, most of the pictures you find of her that are like not real. She always has a gun. Once you decided you were going and she was taking you, she wasn't letting you stop. And she would even carry opium, for babies or things that would cry to try to keep them quiet. Ultimately, she was responsible for freeing 300 slaves on the Underground Railroad. In actuality, that number is about 1,000, but 700 of those slaves that she's going to help free is going to happen during the Civil War, where she's actually going to work for the Union Army. If you go to your resource page that's in your Division I folder, there are a couple things there about Harriet Tubman. One's a bio that's like 2.5 minutes long, which I think is interesting. There's the trailer for the movie that's come out recently. I think it's called Harriet, maybe it's called Tubman. You'll see it there. It's pretty good. And then there's a short, like 55-minute movie if you're really bored, about a former slave who survives the Underground Railroad and how they sneak him out, and it's pretty interesting. The reward for Harriet Tubman capture is going to end up being about $40,000, which is, I don't know the exact number, it's a lot. $40,000 today is a lot. Back then it was a ton. She'll be named the Moses of her people, like Moses leading the slaves, the Israelites out of, the Jews out of Egypt. And 300 people in the grand scheme of things isn't a whole lot. A matter of fact, if we're going to be completely honest, it's estimated that 40, some books say 50,000 slaves, excuse me, escaped from the Underground Railroad between 1810 and 1850. And you think, well, I just told you $40,000 is a lot. Well, 40,000 slaves seems like a lot, but really it's nothing compared to the millions of people who were in bondage. It's not about how many are gone. It's about the principle of the whole thing. These people are escaping. We've talked a few times about how slaves are property and owners see them as their investment, their money, and their money's disappearing, and they're being aided by white Northerners and freed Africans, and it's more a matter of principle than anything else. Real fast with the Underground Railroad, most slaves who escape are going to be slaves either from Maryland who can get to Philadelphia, northeastern Virginia who can get through Maryland to Philadelphia and then to New York, or slaves from places like Kentucky, potentially Tennessee. Early on, before Texas becomes part of the country, slaves could escape to Mexico. Slavery is going to be illegal there. Before Andrew Jackson decides to invade Florida, slaves could have escaped to there. But once you get into 1830, 40, there's not a whole lot of places to go. And most slaves who escape are already close and border free states. I mean, for you to escape from South Carolina or North Carolina or Mississippi or Alabama, for the most part, is just impossible. It's just too far. It's too far for you to travel, clandestinely, if that's even a word, or secretly. It's too far to go. And so most of the slaves who escape will escape from states that are already bordering free states. In addition to that, most slaves who escape, if they really want to be safe, and they understand this, they need to go all the way to Canada. Just getting into a free state is not going to do it for you. You don't cross over into Ohio and go, yay, and then jump up and down on that side of the river at the people who are chasing you and taunt them. Bounty hunters will move into the free states, Maryland, Pennsylvania. Well, Maryland, it's not a free state. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana. They'll chase them. And sometimes they don't find the slave they're looking for. Sometimes they find a free African, they take them. And so if you really wanted to be free, you know, the safest bet was Canada. And most slaves who escape, especially after 1850, are gonna go there. Most white people in the North opposed equal rights. Most people in the North, even Abraham Lincoln by today's standards, would be considered racist. But you know, this wasn't something where people in the North were hoping to help them. I mean, a lot of people in the North, number one, didn't really care because they didn't have anything to do with it. They didn't see it. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't really that important to them. And number two, you know, there was a lot of prejudice and a lot of fear. Hey, these people will come here. They'll take our jobs. You have this whole wave of immigrants who are working for nothing on the canals and the railroads and in the factories. You know, and so there's a lot of opposition to freeing these people, even in the northern free states. In places like New York, there will be riots on a few cases where, you know, angry whites will go after black neighborhoods of free blacks and lynch free blacks and hang them. And you know, even when the Civil War comes, and I'm getting way ahead of myself, if you told most of the guys who signed up to fight that they were fighting to free the slaves, they would have dropped their guns and went home. Now that will change a little bit as the war goes on, but those guys are going to join they're going to join the Union Army to save the United States, not the free Africans. And so there's a lot of prejudice. There's a lot of resistance even here in the North. Let me see. The federal government is going to stand in the way of abolition. And I told you the other day that, you know, there's going to be a gag rule. It's not even permissible to bring it up. White Southerners were completely against freeing the slaves. Even the poorest white person, as long as they're slavery, even the poorest white person is not at the bottom of the totem pole. And so, you know, there's a lot of prejudice, there's a lot of resentment. You know, by 1860, the value of the slaves in the United States is over $4 billion, which is more than all the things that the factories are all producing in the North. And you know, that money going away is not something that's going to be swallowed very easily. And the other thing with the Southerners is they don't like being told what to do by someone who doesn't live there. They're different than the Northerners, and these people are butting in their way of life and trying to decide what's right and what's wrong for them. And so there's a lot of resentment. In 1831, after Nat Turner, you know, the thought of freeing slaves or even talking about it is really kind of taboo. It's not even brought up. I mean, after Nat Turner, the slaves were enemies. You know, towns, states are going to organize and train militias for one reason and one reason only, and that's to stop slave uprisings. And so, you know, a lot of Southerners will claim that slaves are being protected by them. They feed them, they clothe them, they you know, have given them, you know, this Christian religion. They've you know, they're helping them. They couldn't survive on their own. They would freeze in the North, and they wouldn't know what to do, and they couldn't take care of themselves. And if you let them go, they'd be begging to come back because they won't be able to survive on their own, which obviously is complete bull. And so, you know, this whole entire abolitionist Underground Railroad thing is very, very troubling if you're a Southerner. And that's it. Okay, tomorrow I'll post a test for you. I'll give you a couple days to do it. I do want to add real fast, I'm going to try something new when I start the new unit. where I'm going to put a few multiple choice questions a day in the video, just to make sure you're watching them instead of giving you written assignments, I think, and you'll just answer them from there. So we'll see. I'll let you know. But Thursday and Friday you got the test. Take your time. Use your notes printed out. If you get a chance, the review I think is there. You could always look it up and see if you could fill it out. It might help you a little bit. But take your time. Got any questions? Let me know. Be safe. Next time I see you, I think it'll be May, right? Should be. But from the garage and the killer rabbits that I had to fight again. Be safe. See you later.
Standing on the moon with nothing